Welcome back to the Buckland Radio Frankenstein radio controls, broadcasting out of a hot air balloon above a field in western Cleveland, Ohio. Let's see, today we're speaking with psychic witch Mat Auryn, a writer on witchcraft that has donated some really lovely items to our permanent collection here. His book, Psychic Witch, has really captured the occult imagination, and really excited to get into this with Matt. First, some business. On Saturday, February 6th, we're hosting Judica Illis for an online workshop on spellcasting. I guess I should just drop the links right here, and I guess I can. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you visit our website, bucklandmuseum.org, we have tickets for it available there. I mean, this is a great opportunity to learn the secrets of spellcasting with one of the greats. So please come join us on Saturday. I think it's at 8 p.m. So our current show in our rotating exhibit space, Apparitions, closes on Valentine's Day. So check it out while you can. It's very beautiful. We have things on display from the 1600s to 2020. Up next is a show called Transmutations, Witches, Healers, and Oracles, which will present the esoteric photographic works of Courtney Brooke, Destiny Turner, Alexis Carl, and Mal Ig, with words by renowned author Kristen Soleil. Both of these shows have been loaned to the collection by esoteric artist extraordinaire Stephen Romano, at least collector extraordinaire Stephen Romano. Thank you, Stephen. And Matt, welcome to the virtual Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic in Cleveland, Ohio.
Thanks for having me. This is a huge honor.
That's what you say. So let's hope it works that way. So where are you talking to us from?
Oh, I'm located in the Bay Area now. When I wrote the book, I was living near Salem, Massachusetts. But right when the pandemic, like right before it started, I moved to the West Coast.
So what do you say, West Coast, Best Coast, or do you miss the beasts from the East?
Well, I'm native to California. I only lived on the East Coast for about 6 years. It was a great time, and I learned a lot. I trained a lot, but I do not miss the weather like a single bit. Yeah. California weather is much, much better. No snow.
You know, I always find it... I dread the snow all year as it goes, and then when it shows up, I mean, I'm looking out right now. We got a nice coating of snow last night. It's actually really beautiful. I think part of one thing that really attracts me to all this is really keeping in tune with the seasons. But I don't know, this time of year would be when I'd be going on vacation, and I'm feeling kind of bummed that I'm not going anywhere. So anyway, enjoy the wonderful weather there. So we have some comments here. Crystalline Crow says, "Yay, Matt." Ashley Hall. Hi, Ashley. How you doing? Sandy is saying, "Evening, Stephen and Matt." Evening, Sandy. Let's see. Damien, Mary Meet. And Lori Sherman says, "Listening along at work." All right. Well, hope we're not too distracting, or maybe hopefully we're distracting enough. So, Raven Buckland, the person who founded the museum that we're in, can you tell us a bit about how you discovered his works? You had mentioned that there's some favorite books by him.
Yeah, so I actually discovered his work as a child reading Silver Ravenwolf. It sounds like a funny place to discover him, but when reading her books as a child, I actually learned about a lot of people and decided to research them, which is one of the reasons in my book I wanted to really mention other people that have come before me and other works, in hopes that, you know, for people that this may be their first book, that they discover people. Yeah, Big Blue was not... So I'm a generation a bit younger than when Big Blue came out. So it didn't have, that specific book did not have the impact on me that it did the generations before me, where it was like the book that came out, like the manual. My favorite books tend to actually be his books more focused on, surprise, mediumship and psychism, like Spirit Book, the Solitary Medium, and the Spirit Communication one. So like the red one, the kind of dictionary one, and then the small medium one are my personal favorites.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, you had made a comment about somewhere on our social media, you're like the top of the pyramid when it comes to being able to engage with people online, and I'm really impressed by you. But you had mentioned, well, Ray, he loved his Ouija boards and his spirit boards, and it seems like you must too. Let's take a look at this beauty here that you donated to the collection here. I mean, this is gorgeous. When you look at it in the right light, it has a heavenly glow to it. This is your psychic witch spirit board. This is number 1 of 50. And where did you get interested in these? What were your first experimentations like?
Oh, well, as a child, I dabbled with it. And like many people, it's become sort of a rite of passage to, play around with the spirit board and have some kind of scary experience so you can have a scary tale to tell people. And I think that, there's truth and falsehood in regards to spirit boards in general. And I think a big part of that is also your expectations. So sort of like any sort of spell work or any sort of psychic tool, the frame of mind that you're entering into it is going to paint the experience in a major way. So as a child, I would play with the spirit board, and we had all those Hollywood shows and movies like The Exorcist and stuff like that kind of painted them in a scary light, which was half the fun and half of sort of that initiation as a child. But I put it away for a long time, and not because I thought it was like evil or spooky or anything like that. Until about maybe like 10 years ago, I started playing with them a bit more as I started kind of exploring like physical tools for psychism and mediumship and stuff like that. And the results were very, very different than when I was, a small child trying to be scared.
Right. Any kind of tips for protection for people? Because that's the one thing when people come in here and they ask me, they're like, how do I use one of these safely? And I'm like, I don't know if I should tell you that there is a really safe ways for you to do it, because I don't really want to be liable for anything like that. But you being a psychic witch.
Yeah, I mean, I
have good tips.
I think a lot of that is, as I said, overhyped, and a lot of that has to deal with expectations that you're entering into it with. For me personally, I don't believe that it's any more or any less dangerous than any other sort of psychic tool, be that a pendulum or, tarot cards or even dowsing rods. Even with those things, it's all about, what is your intent? So who are you trying to communicate with? How are you using it? What is the state of mind you're entering into it? I think a lot of that has to deal with that satanic panic era of, trying to take any sort of spiritualist tool, because it originally was a spiritualist tool, any sort of alternative faith, anything, and vilify it and make it scary and demonic, and kind of imprint that onto the public. I have not had any experiences beyond, childhood trying to kind of freak myself out. And I think a lot of those experiences have less to do with spirits, even adults who do it. And I think it has more to do with their fetch or their lower self, which is a concept that I explore in my book. It's a concept in a lot of witchcraft and spiritual traditions. In parapsychology, there is a long documented history of things that are often deemed as poltergeists coming from an actual person. And usually this tends to be someone who is either mentally or emotionally imbalanced, or it's someone who is going through puberty and, you know, their hormones and emotions and stuff like that. So like in a lot of, you know, poltergeist experiences, you will often find a teenager in the household, or someone who is like maybe not emotionally or mentally well. But I think, you know, and I'm not saying that poltergeists aren't true, like that they don't exist. Just like I'm not someone to say demons don't exist, but I think a lot of people label things as demons or poltergeists quickly. And I think the spirit realm and just the energetic realm in general is a lot more nuanced than that.
I have to agree. And one thing I have to say is I really loved the ideas when you were exploring that in your book, Psychic Witch. Now in its seventh printing, right?
Yeah, I think it's more than that now. It's yeah.
That's amazing. All right,
Yeah.
so get your low number 7th printing here at the Buckland Museum. How's that? But yeah, I seem to remember that there was an issue where some people have misread your information about Baphomet here. And I thought this was such a really wonderful kind of exploration of Baphomet. Probably one of the better ones that I've seen in things. So,
Thank you.
Explore page 109 of Psychic Witch for that. It's you did a really extraordinary job with that. So.
Well, and the kind of funny thing about all of that is that, you know, I bring up the Baphomet in the section either right before or right after shadow work, you know, and I even acknowledge that, you know, the image is kind of scary, you know, and it is a little bit off-putting to a lot of people. But that's kind of the point, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think that goes back to, you know, this classical occult attitude of either trying to keep people out that aren't ready for, you know, certain information or certain levels of working. So I think in a lot of ways, the image of Baphomet itself is sort of a gatekeeper to deeper levels of mystery. And I hate using the word mystery because people tend to think that it's like, you know, guarded secrets that you're keeping to yourself, but it's more of that, you know, mystery, like the experiential things that you can't really convey or communicate entirely. And I think Baphomet is like the perfect symbol of that because of also what it represents, which is just the vastness of everything.
I mean, it really does. Yeah, it's funny. I was talking about the horn god with one of my guests recently, and they were having a hard time pinning it down. They're like, so he's the god of the sun and the god of the underworld and of the hunt and the wild and all this stuff. Why isn't it just one thing? And all I could think is, hey, let's keep the mystery and mystery religions here, right? You know, let's ponder this for a little while. You know, one quick answer while I'm giving you a tour is not going to give any kind of solutions. So,
right. Well, and even then, like, you know, when it comes to like the god and the goddess in witchcraft, just my study of Kabbalah has helped me understand a lot of that. And you aren't going to necessarily be like, oh, well, if you think of them as being in this Sephirah instead of down here, you know, you can't really explain that to a tourist in 2 minutes.
Right. So Lori says, so something along the lines of unintentional thought form. And I think, well, what we're talking about still here is the poltergeist ideas.
Yeah. So you could see it as a thought form, especially if people in the household are feeding into this idea that it is an entity, then I think it definitely can turn into a thought form in the sense of like an egregore. Part of the problem with occultism in general is different streams of occultism have different jargon, and that jargon isn't universally defined and the same for each. But if you mean thought form as in like a self-created sort of entity, like an artificial entity. I agree that it can become something like that. But to my understanding, my experience, and my research, it tends to at least start not even so much as a thought form, but just as manifestations of, this kind of unbridled psychic and emotional energy just sort of lashing out, which is why it tends to be with emotionally or mentally unbalanced people, or, people going through puberty, where all of that's sort of out of whack.
Okay, wonderful. So our friend Kelvin says, at what age did you become psychic or seeing spirits? Also, Baphomet is fascinating. Yeah, where did this begin? Ever since you mentioned reading Silver Raven Wolf as a child?
Yeah.
The splitting of the atom?
So it's kind of hard to pinpoint, like, when did I become psychic, particularly because I believe that everyone is psychic. It's just a matter of how you develop that or accept that, which is a premise of my book, of how to develop that, regardless if you think you are or not. But, I did have more experiences than most people, that at least I knew in my life, other than my father, who, as a born-again Christian, is really weird and reluctant and kind of, keeps it secret. But one of the stories, and I don't know if I put this in the book or not, but one of the stories I'm told is how, like, when I was a baby in the crib, my father would come up and kind of, point right here, and I'd start laughing, and he'd slowly start doing that further and further and further, to where he could be in a different room and point at me, and I would just start busting up laughing. And this sort of became, sort of his trick that he would show off to people, that, he could point in another room and I would start, laughing, which is funny because we had a whole exchange recently where he was thinking about me, and, I texted him saying, hey, I'm thinking about you. And he's like, oh, I know, I ESP'd you because I know you feel it. And I was like, yeah, I do. In relation to when did I start seeing, like, spirits and stuff like that, I cannot put an age to that. It was definitely very, very young. And I think a lot of people have those experiences as children. And that's one of the things I also address in the book, is this idea that children are more naturally predisposed to psychic experiences, mostly because of their brainwave states. Because children under 7 years of age, studies have shown, are predominantly in the alpha brainwave state, as opposed to beta, which is more of what we're in as adults, like what we're in right now, talking and listening and learning and stuff like that. And children around 8 years old, it's interesting because one of the things I talk about is in child development, this is around the age when they start understanding what is expected of them, and that they should act certain ways because people perceive them in a certain way. So I don't know if, like, that brainwave shifts naturally, or if it's more of a kind of cultural conditioning thing. And I suspect it's the latter, that it's a social conditioning type thing. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do think that, I was born a little bit more predisposed than a lot of people. And everyone has their strengths and their weaknesses naturally. And I explore, like, how to discover that and how to strengthen the ones that are weak. But for me, my two natural strong ones are external clairvoyance. So, like, actually seeing things, seeing auras, seeing entities. And the other is clairtangency. So, like, touching. And I used to go into haunted places, and I would literally just kind of, like, use my hands like radar to sense where an entity was, and then, like, move in onto it. Yeah. So
that's fun. You were talking about being a kid. You were saying 8 seems to be the thing. So here in our collection, we have 3 mirrors currently on display. One I like to point out is very inert. Nobody ever sees anything in that one. in Ray's, the one that we have that Raymond Buckland made, it's very interesting because people see the interpersonal dramas when they stare into it. Like, she's drinking my almond milk again. But there's one that I had to hide. It's kind of buried in the corner because that's the one where the kids 9-ish will stare into it and they freak out and they start talking about the shadows. And this is always when it's really too busy here for me to deal with something like this. I got somebody in the gift shop asking me, do these t-shirts shrink? I got somebody else over here. I got a screaming kid now. Their parents are looking at me like, what's the matter with my kid? So I buried it now. Interesting enough, this mirror used to, we believe it was actually created by Rosemary Ellen Guiley. So I think that's really interesting because it seems to be that age where maybe they're interested enough to actually look at something like that, but not quite brainwashed by society enough not to be able to see what's in it.
Right. And that's why I think it's the second exercise in my book, like right off the bat. And this is based on a workshop that I've reframed, but the whole idea is to give yourself that permission to be psychic again, particularly by not placing an emphasis on if you're correct or incorrect, but just allowing yourself to play and have fun. And I liken it to role playing because it is role playing, but once you can kind of step out of your, left brain, for lack of a better word, and like, am I doing this right? Am I accurate? Am I making a fool of myself? In my experience, this is when people start flooding with psychic information because they have stepped out of their own way. And I think that is the biggest kind of hurdle to jump over.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. So one thing I really love about your book here, Psychic Witch, is it's essentially a workbook, and you can go through. And would you say this is something that you have to take in a linear fashion, or can you pop around a bit?
I recommend doing it in a linear fashion, at least for the majority of the book. Just because things kind of call back to other things, and you want to make sure you have certain foundations like firm, or else there's a strong chance it may not work. So you can't be an Olympic swimmer if you can't take off your water wings. So I do try to recommend that people do it as I teach it, in the order that I teach it, and then at the very end of the book, I'm now that you know how to do it, make it your own.
So I found this really moving here, in memory of Raven Gramasi. When I saw that, I was like, oh, I knew I liked this guy. Raven Gramasi, how did you discover his work?
Oh, I mean,
for people that don't know, who is he?
So Raven Gramasi is a famous witchcraft author. He's also the founder of a couple traditions. A lot of people don't know this, but Scott Cunningham and Donald Michael Craig both studied under him and were in his traditions before they left and started doing their own thing and wrote super famous books. This was before Raven even had any published works. He, interestingly, is from the same area of San Diego I was from. And then when I moved to the East Coast, him and his wife, Stephanie, were also in that area at the same time as well. But Raven's work, particularly his work later in life, was super influential for me. Knowing the man a little bit, I have tremendous respect for him. He was someone who would always go out of his way to answer any sort of questions I had related to the craft or magic or occultism. And there's actually a story to that little dedication. Are you familiar with it?
No, not at all.
So at the beginning of the book, I have like a billion endorsements because I wanted to give it to anyone and everyone that I respected that was influential to me and ask them for an endorsement. However, Raven had just passed. And I haven't publicly talked about this, but I knew when he had passed because I texted Christopher Penczak immediately and was like, I just had this strong ping about Raven, is he okay? And Christopher was like, don't tell anyone, like, we're going to the hospital right now, like, he's at the end. So I didn't get a chance to have him read my manuscript, which I really, really wanted him to. So, I had all his books on a shelf, his whole collection, and I did bibliomancy. So, I asked Raven, I was like, Raven, help me find a quote so I can do a memorial piece for you. So I'm doing the bibliophile thing and my fingers stop on a book. So I pull the book out and I do the same thing again. I'm like, Raven, please help me find, a quote for your dedication. And I opened it up and it was in The Witch's Craft. And it was the perfect sentence because it's literally about, how important psychic ability is in magic and witchcraft. So it's like, oh, that's perfect. That's awesome. And then later, even weirder, because I've had a lot of weird experiences with Raven since he has passed, a lot of synchronistic things that have occurred. And Christopher Penczak and I were over at Stephanie, his now widow's house. And we were visiting and she was showing me all the stuff and she hadn't gotten a chance to look at the book and she didn't know that there was a dedication or anything like that in the book. And she's like, oh, I have a gift for you because my birthday was coming up, right? And so she hands me this pentacle and she's like, this is a pentacle that was Raven Gramasi's. And so I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. It was one that was designed for him specifically and that he wore a lot. And as I'm looking at it, I'm like, holy shit, this is the pentacles based on the book cover for The Witch's Craft that I got the quote from. And she's, I was like, oh, why did you pick this one? And she's like, I wasn't sure which one to pick, but I really felt like this is the one that you needed. So it was like another weird synchronicity that she happened to pick that one, which was the book cover that I used the quote from his book. So I thought that was really neat. And that pentacle is one of my most cherished possessions that I own.
I bet. We have a couple things that belong to Raven here. I talked to Stephanie. She has promised us a couple really cool, wonderful things for the collection. What a neat individual. Here I have the Teachings of Holy Strega.
Oh, that old copy.
Oh yeah. You know who this belonged to?
Who? Buckland?
Dr. Leo Martello.
Oh.
Yeah, so some interesting history in that piece there. So tomorrow for us is Blessed Be from Australia. Blessed Be tomorrow. Yeah, so you had the wonderful intro there, or the dedication there to Raven, but then there's also 4 others there. I thought that was really sweet. We have Silver Ravenwolf, who of course is, she's done a lot of things for the craft. So I thought that was very sweet to see that in there. Christopher Penczak, who we talked about, Lori Cabot, Devin Hunter. Devin Hunter is your roommate, but what's your connection to Lori Cabot?
Yeah, he's my roommate now. He wasn't when I wrote the book. He also did the foreword, and I wasn't living with him then either. So yeah, it was. I chose the 4 most important figures to me in my path of witchcraft. Obviously, Silver, because she was my gateway into witchcraft. And I do honestly believe that she is one of the most important witches of modern history. And I think she did a lot to sort of save and revive witchcraft for a whole new generation.
Absolutely.
And then after that was Christopher Penczak, who I trained with, and has become a very close friend and mentor. I still go to him with stuff. And then Lori, who I also trained with, and I worked in her store for a while. And I've had the honor to read next to her, not read with her, but read next to her, and also sort of like learn from her in between readings, being able to chat and stuff like that. And then Devin Hunter, who is the main tradition that I'm in, Sacred Fires, and who wrote the foreword to my book.
Yeah, how cool. It was really nice to kind of see that lay the foundation here. So if somebody was just bopping around YouTube or Facebook, came across this, had no idea where to begin, do you have a suggestion for set somebody put the first foot forward into being a psychic witch?
My book.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
part of why I wrote it. I start the book off not making any assumptions. So I'm assuming the person that has picked up this book knows nothing about witchcraft, occultism, or psychism.
So I'm going to argue with that, because this doesn't really scream that vibe you get of book that like is made for beginners.
Well, I mean, it's
like,
definitely.
I'm not saying that beginners can't tap into it, but there's things in here that I think are a little bit beyond Psychic 101.
Right.
And
right.
I thought that was pretty refreshing about it.
As you go through it, though, like it starts off very, very basic, like you don't know anything. And then I go deeper and deeper and deeper into things. But I did want it to be completely newbie friendly, while also still giving it substance and depth, particularly to people who have been on this path and are seasoned.
Yeah, I think that's what struck me about this the most, actually, was that idea that so my partner in the museum, Tony, she's probably watching this here. She had reached out to you about this donation. So had you heard about the Buckland Museum when she had reached out to you, or was this a new idea?
Oh, no. I already knew about the Buckland Museum, and I was already following you guys and watching it, because you guys are not only Raymond Buckland, right? But to my knowledge, it's the only witchcraft and magic museum oriented towards modern day practices. Coming from the Salem area, there's a lot of witchcraft museums that are focused more on, a certain era or the past, but nothing that has modern actual practitioners as opposed to the accused. So
yeah,
reached out like huge.
We really want to celebrate the culture of witchcraft, not just like this is how people died, but this is how people live. You know what I mean? Like the idea that it's witchcraft is never going to go away, and hopefully 500 years from now, Buck Rogers can go to the, in the 25th century, go to whatever this museum turns into at that point, and we can have practitioners of the time and celebrate that sort of thing at that point. I'll probably still be alive, so I'll be around to find out. But you know what I mean? It's like part of what we're doing here as well is Ray quit collecting in the mid-'70s, so we have a lot of catching up to do. So, we're always trying to like play catch up here. And here's Tony right here. We're so happy that you're represented here. So. Hi, Tony.
Thank you.
So Michelle says, love this book. Awesome. Lisa Malloy, our neighbor here in Old Brooklyn, says, hello, I love that Ouija board. Love it too, but let's remember that Ouija is a brand name. This is a spirit board. So gorgeous. And my wife, Jillian, the other partner that I have in this whole endeavor, she loves the barn owls. what is your connection to the barn owl?
Ooh, that is a very deep and complicated question, which I'll reveal some of it and not all of it. I have a very strong connection with a spirit that often takes the form of a barn owl. That has been probably my strongest and most important spirit contact that I've had. But aside from that, wanting to have it in there to honor it, the owl, just like the cat, I feel like the owl and the cat are the two animal symbols that represent both psychism and magic and witchcraft, and both have a history in regards to both in folklore and still as modern symbols.
So by putting you solo right here, just over your shoulder, we see a drawing of an owl there.
Oh, yeah.
And I've kind of watched this story unfold. What is the deal with that owl? And let me, oops, there we go.
So that was...
It looks like he's wearing sunglasses.
How can I point? Yeah, it kind of does. From there, big black eyes.
Cool guy owl.
Yeah, that was drawn by this kid, Kai, who is 7 years old. His mother reached out to me on Instagram and was like, hey, my son is like in love with your book. And he wants to write you a letter. Would you be okay with that? So I was like, yeah, definitely. Like, here's a contact address if he wants to. And so he sent me this beautiful handwritten letter with drawings talking about how much he loved my book and how, because in the book I talk about how I worked in Salem at Enchanted Shop, which is the Laurie Cabot shop. And he had went with his book hoping to meet me, but was not able to meet me because I had already moved to the West Coast, right? So he talks about that, and he talks about how like his cousin's always saying that magic isn't real because he lost his wand, and his cousin was like, oh, just go get a stick. And he was talking about how he was saving up to get a broom at the witchery. So it was a very sweet letter, and it really touched me because I was that kid that was writing letters to Silver Ravenwolf because Llewellyn Books, I don't think they have it anymore, but they used to have to write to this author, like, here's this address. And I used to write her. So it really struck something in me. So I wrote him back, and I talked to Penny Cabot about the wand thing, and she makes beautiful wands for Enchanted. And so she crafted one just for him. I got him a gift card for Enchanted, and then Chris, the owner, matched that, which was very, very generous. And then I got, even though there's COVID right now, so it's got to wait, I got him a gift certificate for the witchery for him and his mother so that they could create their own brooms together. And then I gave him, just kind of some simple advice for a child in regards to magic and meditation and how to like keep up that practice. I wanted to encourage him, and I wanted to be the response I wanted as a child. Because I never got a letter back from Silver, which I'm sure has to deal with the volume she had at that time, because she was like huge at that time. And I don't even know if she got the letters to begin with. I do correspond with her now online, and she is an amazing, amazing person. But I wanted to be that response that I wanted. And then he wrote me back another letter, and he drew that owl in that one. And it's my favorite drawing by him for obvious reasons. I have the whole story laid out on a Pathos blog. If you go to matauryn.com/Kai, Kai, you can read the whole story, including the letter he sent me and stuff like that.
That's really cool. Why do I feel that in like 20 years, whoever is running the Buckland Museum at that point might be reaching out to somebody named Kai for something for display? That is so cool. Jillian says, love your animal connections. I agree. Both cats and owls seem like otherworldly creatures too. And Jillian, I agree. That's why our cat Birch looks like an owl, right? So we have a really wonderful cat. her name's Birch. She looks like an owl. So the cat with the owl face. Lisa Moy says, those are amazing gifts for your fan. I would say so as well. Edlin says, I like the Bernie one too, boo. LOL. I don't see a Bernie one, but hey, we're Bernie fans here. Crystalline Crow says, I recommend reading the whole story. It is very sweet. Yeah, so that's on your Pathos blog. How long have you been blogging there?
Several years now. I think like 2016-ish was when I started. I think it's 2016. May have been a little bit earlier, a little bit later. I had originally written just on my own, website, just kind of my own stuff. And Jason Mankey liked it. He is the channel manager of Pathos Pagan. And he asked me if I would like to write for Pathos. And it's interesting too, because this is one of my sores that I still have as a writer, is a blogger at the time who isn't Pathos, but another pagan blogger that was big at the time, made a public comment that Jason Mankey must be desperate for writers because no one, quote, no one is interested in what Mat Auryn has to say about witchcraft.
Who got the last laugh here? So I have posted a link to the story of Kai here, so recommend everyone check that out. So what's next? Psychic Witch 2? Oh, I had an idea. So Psychic Witch, I loved it, but I also loved what is it, Werewolf Magic? But so I was like, I'm gonna write a book called Psychic Werewolf.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna rake in the dough and everybody's gonna love me.
Yeah, I haven't read Werewolf Magic, but it's on my list of things to read. That's a Llewellyn title, right?
Yeah, I read it right before Julian and I got away for a few days out in the woods. I could feel it. It wasn't right around the full moon, unfortunately, but thoroughly enjoyable. Denny Sargent, the writer, I met him at Pentacle last year, and we had all these funny connections. So I don't know. I enjoyed the book. I think everyone out there may enjoy it as well. Kelvin says, in ancient Egypt, cats were worshipped as gods, goddesses, and they still are today. Just here in Cleveland, Ohio, I've noticed. You should see the way that my cats are treated, Kelvin. So, what's new? Psychic Witch 2?
Sort of. I'm still kind of keeping it the main project under wraps, just because I don't want the energy to get weird. Like when I'm manifesting anything, I take that magical rule of to be silent. I'm keeping the energy to myself. But in a lot of ways, it is a follow-up to Psychic Witch, and in a lot of ways, it's a standalone. It's a whole aspect of the book that I could not approach in the book because of word count. So because of word count, it was more important to focus on the things that I did. And so this will kind of be carrying that other bit that I didn't get to dive into that I want to dive into. And that one, I am honored. Sorry about that, motorcycle just went by. I am honored to say that Silver Ravenwolf has agreed to do the foreword to it, which is a huge honor.
That's great.
For a little childhood Matt. Plus, I still respect her. I still love her. And, haters aside, other than her influence, her shit works. If you do the stuff, and that's what's important to me. 2 years ago now, I actually went back to Teen Witch. Remember the Teen Witch book she put out and the Teen Witch?
Oh, yeah.
And I decided to do every spell in it to see if it worked. And it all works. Her stuff has merit. So it's a huge honor to have her do the foreword. And to my understanding, it's the first foreword she's done for everyone or for anyone, which is another huge honor. I have another book contracted as well after that one. So I have a third book contracted, which is going in a totally different direction, which it's going to be tarot focused, which I've never told anyone yet. But it's going to be something
first
than what's out there. So I'm excited
So
about
what's
that.
your favorite tarot deck?
You what?
What's your favorite tarot deck?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Because it also depends on what I'm doing with the tarot deck. So if I'm reading for people, you know, I do like the Rider-Waite-Smith. I particularly like the Pamela Coleman Smith like anniversary edition, the one that's a little bit more sepia toned.
Yeah,
as opposed to the original. I love that one. And then my non-traditional deck that I like a lot, I like Shadowscapes by Stephanie Puin-Law, which is like kind of a water paint. It's sort of like this weird mix of like Japanese and Celtic and like fairy. And people either love it or hate it, but it's the one that, like, if you were to come see me for a reading in Salem, it's probably the deck I would be using. But I use different decks for different purposes, particularly if it's like I have certain decks that I have dedicated to certain spirits and certain deities for communication for them. I have certain decks that I use for certain types of magic with the tarot. But those are my two main ones. And right now I'm going through that whole phase of nerding out on the Toth deck and, you know, Crowley's writings on it and that whole rabbit hole.
Yeah. I always recommend the podcast Fortune's Wheelhouse. If you've ever seen that one, they compare the Rider-Waite-Coleman deck versus the Thoth deck, and they just go through each card. Okay. And it's, you'll think that you're an expert on something for years and years, and then within like 10 minutes, a whole new world has been like explained to you. Fortune's Wheelhouse, it's fantastic.
I think that's this field in general, like occultism and, you know, like whether it's witchcraft or it's astrology or tarot, like there's always something to learn.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's fun because I give tours, and every day I hope that somebody's going to stump me on something, because that gives me a whole new thing to research, you know. And it's it can be embarrassing where I'm like, I have no idea, but it gives me the opportunity to explore something, so I don't get stumped again by that question. You know what I mean?
I say that a lot, and I respect people who do that. You know, because there's a lot of people out there that'll just bullshit an answer just to sound like an expert. I'm very big on saying, you know, I don't know, or this isn't my area of expertise. And I'll either recommend someone who would know the answer, or I'll tell them, you know, let me look into it and I'll get back to you with the answers. But I think there are a lot of people that will just bullshit answers. And I don't think that that's self-serving. That's not helping the person who's looking to learn.
And also, I mean, I feel like the ability to be able to call out a bullshitter is psychic ability, but it's kind of like low grade where almost everybody has it, you know? Mm-hmm. So if you're just trying to like randomly say stuff, people are going to know anyway. So you may as well just be like, I have no idea, but I'm going to find out. So the Shadowscapes Tarot, does that have something to do with Lori Cabot?
No, not at all.
We have a spirit cord that she gave us when we reopened, and it sits there and looks beautiful. And I noticed that the cards that she's tied to it are from that deck. So
yeah, she with her cords, she uses different decks depending on what the purpose is.
Oh, okay.
I have several of hers, but they're still on the East Coast. I still want them, which is funny because one of them is to be a published author, which I bought right before I was offered a book deal by Llewellyn. So,
I mean, that's magic, right?
It's Lori Cabot. She is magic.
Yeah, she's something special. Lisa Malloy says a tarot-focused book. Can't wait. Betrayal Earth says Tarot de Messiah. Yeah. Hi, Matt, from Maya. Hi, Maya. Picked up a demon deck a few months ago. All right. Matt, do you make your own Melon Oil, or do you ever use it?
I do not make my own. When it comes to Abramelin, I use other people's. It's actually not an oil I use a ton of. I'm a big fan of using other people's oils as well as crafting my own. And in that regard, I'm very selective about whose oils I use because I've purchased a lot of oils from a lot of people and not all of them work. And I think it's sort of that thing where you can follow a recipe, but if the magic isn't there, it's not really going to do a whole lot. I think that's similar to like baking. Like you can have grandma's recipe, but like, grandma's love really is that secret ingredient that is hard to replicate. So I usually recommend when it comes to purchasing oils, I tend to recommend Chas Bogan's at the Mystic Dream. Those are extremely effective and we have an abundance of it in this household. I also recommend a couple other people, but that's the one I'm going to shout out in this. But the Abramelin oil, I don't always use a ton of. I have other similar oils that are used for like anointing and purification and all that, all the Abramelin-y type stuff.
So, what's the name of the place that you suggest to get the Abramelin oil?
The Mystic Dream.
The Mystic Dream. And that is also where you can pick up one of your spirit boards here, right?
Yes.
But you won't get number 1 of 50 because that is currently on display at the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic. So what are your thoughts about us actually pulling this out sometime and using it?
Oh,
the spirit board is there to be used, correct?
Yeah, I would love it. Especially like I think you were kind of half joking on Twitter about contacting Ray and seeing
No, not at all.
Because I think he would totally be into it too.
Oh yeah. No, Ray, it's my understanding that Tony has someplace stashed away a journal from 1959 to 1960 of Ray every day doing experiments with his Ouija board and every day going through and documenting what was contacted. And I'm always like, hey, Tony, when do I get to see this? And she's like, yeah, when you're ready, it'll show up. You get to look at it someday.
I would love to see that myself.
So, but yeah, Ray pops in here every once in a while. Back at our old location, the way that Gerald Gardner's besom hung, it would sway in a particular way when we were talking about Ray. Every other time we would talk to him, it would go like this. But when we were talking about Ray, like intensely, it would sway like this. And there's been a few other ways that Ray's popped in here, but it's always great to see him. We miss him very much.
I love that.
Did you ever get a chance to meet him?
I did not, no.
Well, maybe pop on one of your spirit boards and see if he could say hi. So, any final thoughts here? We're getting to an hour here, so.
Not really. If you haven't bought my book, check it out.
Come back to the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic, and I'll show you the spirit board.
Yeah, and I am looking forward to actually visiting in person when the plague has passed. I
don't know if that's ever happened, but yeah, like one day it's gonna all go away, and we'll be so happy to host you here. It's gonna be amazing. I run a pretty tight ship here as far as the amount of people that we can keep in here, and people show up all the time just randomly. Hey, I just drove up from Cincinnati. What do you mean it's sold out for the rest of the day? So I'm saying to you viewers out there, if you want to come visit, book your tickets online, bucklandmuseum.org. We're easy to find. We're the only witchcraft museum in Cleveland, Ohio at the moment. So I'm assuming at some point somebody else is going to see how much fun I have and be like, well, I got to do it too. But I'm just going to enjoy being the solo one in the meantime. Let's see. Lisa says, I'm still sorry I missed him when he was in town. that was at our opening. I know. Got my autographed copy. The energy is so lovely. I gotta say, Matt, you really do radiate an awesome, positive vibe. We love it. And Tony says, possibly a class if you come visit.
I hope so. If I'm invited to do such, I would love to.
All right, that sounds good. All right, so Matt, if you will, please stick around for just a moment. I'm going to say goodbye to the crew. Hey, thanks for everybody tuning in. Watch us here at the Buckland Museum, Frankenstein Radio Controls. Like I had mentioned at the beginning, on Saturday, February 6th, 8 p.m., Judica Illis, one of the great spellcasters of all time. She is going to be doing a workshop via our Zoom. I'm really, really excited about this. Judica's books are extremely powerful. She's a great writer. She's a great person, and I am so thrilled that we're going to be able to host her here. She was going to come visit us for the last couple of years. COVID really has destroyed everything. So come hang out with us on Saturday night. Like I said, Apparitions closes on February 14th. This show is fantastic. It's not to be missed, but the next show is pretty amazing as well. All right, so everybody out there in YouTube and Facebook streaming land, stay witchy, my friends.